So guys, thank you so much for inviting me again. I've been here many, many times talking about different things. So I was, just like a lot of you guys, I've worked at agencies for all of my life, for over 22 years. And I grew very frustrated with the way that we do things at agencies. But then I was inspired by what other people were doing in other fields and how they could compress a very long and frustrating process into very short time with an agile methodology, design thinking, and all of that. So my question was, can we try to do this in communication and advertising? And I have seemed to find one way to do it. So I'm going to take you guys through that. I started trying to think, how am I going to open this up, like this idea of hacking advertising, of making something in a very, very short time. And I was in my brother's wedding in Brazil 2 weeks ago. And this is a friend of my dad's. He's a Chilean guy called Bernardo Schifrin. And my dad said, come here, listen to the story. And what was happening is Bernardo was the president of Chile's central bank around the 70s, 74 more precisely. And my dad said, he is the biggest hacker that I know. And I couldn't picture him being like a computer hacker, like trying to get into banks and steal data. Like, what do you mean by a hacker? And he said, in 74, Chile had a military coup, and they deposed Salvador Allende, who was elected by the people within a socialist regime. What Pinochet had to do, the General Pinochet, was to roll back all of the Marxist ethos that was getting into the economy and kind of roll it back to pure liberalism within a very, very short period of time. It was a brutal regime. It killed people. It's like not something I'm condoning, obviously. 60% of the economy of Chile was state controlled, and they needed to liberalize it very quickly. So my dad's friend Bernardo, the president of Chile's central bank, and these guys that came to be known as the Chicago Boys, who were studying at the time under Milton Friedman, they got together in a room, and within 1 month they've created a new pension, a new tax, and a new labor system for the country. Something that in other countries takes months, years, and sometimes it never gets done. And I was very impressed. I'm like, my God, how are they able to do this so quickly? Fast forward 40 years in the future, Chile is doing extremely well, has one of the best economic indicators in the world. It's the best economy in South America, and it's doing pretty well. It could have been done differently, but it got done very aggressively in 1 month. And then when you think of this idea of hacking, of breaking through barriers, and trying to do something that is usually not done that way. So I'm going to take you through some. You probably know Marie Kondo, and she kind of teaches us how to rethink where we live and how our things are put in places. She comes to your house very quickly. She changes everything, something that is really difficult to do. This, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's something called the writer's room, which was a new way of writing comedy skits, comedy lines for Saturday Night Live, which is a big American comedy show. And they needed to feed the comedians thousands of lines to run this show every week. How do they do that so aggressively, right? Putting everyone in the same room and running. It's a thing that had never been tried before, and it was extremely successful for them. This guy invented and coined the term of the 4-hour work week, sold a lot of books, 2 million books, New York Times bestseller list. Supposedly the way that he does this is he outsources all of the things that he didn't have to do himself, from answering emails to connecting with teams around the world. And this is one of the things that I secretly like to watch on Netflix. Kitchen Nightmares. This is interesting too. Gordon Ramsay comes in with TV production and everything and changes the way a business is run at a restaurant. Changes the people that run the restaurant, changes the menu, changes the decoration. It can be done very aggressively in a very short time. So why is it that we still produce work at agencies very differently, right? I came to think of it that hacking is a mindset. There is something that unifies what these people are doing that I thought could be replicated into advertising. What do we have there that is equal to all of these examples that I've had? A small collective, some people getting together in a room to make decisions, highly empowered. It's not the power, decision-making power sits within the room. So you don't work separately and then present it to someone. People make decisions as they advance within the problem. Aggressive creativity. Whenever you have all these sets of components, people working together, a big mandate, you're able to press and create something that's very unique and try new formulas. Try, fail, do it again. Remember, startup mentality. Fast and lean. It doesn't require a lot of money, and it's much faster than the usual process. So the thinking was, how can I help hack communication and hack this business that I spent my whole life working in and I was very tired of? There had to be better ways to deliver creative work. And when you start thinking that the creative agency today is still structured very much in the way that it was in the 50s, even though we have a multitude of new points of contact, we have different technologies, very little things have changed. When I worked at large agency, it was the same structure of Mad Men. You have an account director, you would bring it to the strategist, the creative director. You would work in a silo, present the client with a few ideas, they would understand or not. They weren't even part of the process. They would just give you the thumbs up or thumbs down, rework this, or they liked it. And then they would bring it to their boss 3 days later, like, we have a problem, like, we don't like it anymore. They're like, Jesus Christ, this is ridiculous. It has to be, we have to find a better way to do this. So I've been trying different ways of working within this system of agile, of creative sprints for a little bit within these larger structures. And I've decided to leave and start a company that's called The Sexy Beast. And within The Sexy Beast, we've done about 25 sprints. We're starting our 26th sprint next week. We've traveled the world. We've done this across 10 different countries. It's been 2.5 years. We've worked with 180 plus experts that we brought into the sprints, and then they go. And we do 3 different sprint types. One is communication, which is campaigns, you can think of it like that. The second one is branding, and the third one is digital product. So we found different formulas to solve these things in 5 days. All right, so I'm just going to show you some things that came out of our creative sprints for you to have a bit of an idea what I'm talking about. This is a campaign for Europe's 3rd largest low-cost airline, Wizz Air, and they wanted to get more awareness in the UK and in Austria. And what we created together with them in the room was to put a bunch of people in a plane and not tell them where they were going to go. And there's a bigger brand platform that was created underneath all of that, which is to get lost and, have fun, open your horizon, just jump into the moment and do something, which is, something that you can recognize as a brand experience or something like that in the world of agencies. But we've created everything within that experience within 5 days, from finding the airplane that was going to fly, getting everyone committed, figuring out the budget, all the technical aspects, creating all the main assets. All of that was done in 5 days. And I'll show you something slightly different, which is branding. So this is a Finnish distillery, and they've come to us because their story was severely limited. There wasn't really a brand purpose put in place. They needed to redo a lot of the visual structures of the brand, style guides, labels, and all of that, communication too. So we worked on this for 5 days, and we walked out of there with these very specific brand guidelines, created a homepage, all of that. So it can be done. What I'm going to try to take you guys through is our methodology for doing something that's very long in just 5 days. And I hope that it can inspire you to try to do it too. So these creative sprints, they are very clearly defined. We have to prepare them extremely well. We no longer can just wing it and say, okay, here's the brief, let's go, let's get creative. We have to really prepare these sets of conditions so that the sprint itself runs really perfectly. So let me take you through how we prepare things. What, who, where, and how. These are big questions, and they take a while to answer. We never commit to a sprint that will start next week because we have to prepare it really well and it takes time. It doesn't take months, but it takes about from 2 weeks to 4 weeks, depending on the size of the project. So the first thing is the challenge, is what are we here to do? And that is crucial. If I had €1, 1 ruble for every time I picked up a brief that made no sense, I would be a millionaire. There was things missing. Please, let's clap to the terrible briefs of the world. There's always something missing. You haven't captured the right insights. The client, even internally, doesn't really know what he wants. He's trying something, but if he were to only show it to his boss, he would know that that's not what the whole company wants to achieve. So briefs are usually quite messy. Target audiences saying like it's everyone instead of having a particular point of view on what is your target. So crazy. So it takes time to pick up a brief and question your client and try to come up with all of these elements and make it very solid. And the other thing that we force a lot when we do creative sprints is also looking at our limitation set. So we're saying, what is your budget exactly? Don't tell me it's more or less like this, but if you get something very cool in front of me, maybe I'll find them. I'm like, no, that doesn't work. It's a waste of time. Let's assume that what you have is 40. And let's work within those constraints. Are you okay? What are your limitation constraints? What's happening internally once you get to produce this? Let's understand everything that's limiting us. So these are long conversations. We never just take a brief. It takes the time to digest the brief and making sure we're running after the right things. Why? Because within a creative sprint, I don't have the freedom to present something that the client will say, it doesn't work. We only have one shot, so that has to be perfect. The same thing is all the data around it, all the research, everything that we must know, we need to bring to the sprint and we need to discover it before. So there's a lot of conversations going on there. The thing about this part is to be very precise. Everything that it's kind of wishy-washy, we don't really know, but let's see when it starts, will fail. So we have to be precise. The second thing is, who do we bring to these sprints? And one of the beautiful things is that it works slightly different from how an agency works. So within this room, which is the last sprint that we did in Helsinki, working for Reima as a kids apparel brand, we had different types of people in the room, and that's what makes it so powerful. Let me show you who these people are. There's a ton of these people are clients that have stopped for 5 days to work with us together in this room because it was a very important campaign, something that will define the brand during next year. We brought creatives to the process, obviously, so those are people that we know within the agency structure, designers, copywriters, film, director, blah, blah, blah. But we also look at field experts. So we're saying, if we're going to talk about a world that has to do with kids and how they develop mentally, being outside, whatever it is, we need to get people that know this extremely well. And these are people that, specifically, we found a professor at MIT. So we brought some people that could come together with us, and they knew that field subject extremely well. So that's very important to us, putting clients, creatives, and field experts together with consumers, and I'm going to get to that later, is key to make a sprint work out. The other point is location. So whenever you do something that's that special, that doesn't happen every day, we try to pay a lot of attention to where we take people. So this was a house that we rented in Rio, very beautiful. Sometimes we rent more of a corporate setting, but we try to make it interesting. This one was for that distillery that I showed, was inside like this place that keeps wine and spirits in Helsinki, so it was kind of like on location, something that has to do with the brand. Like I told you guys, sometimes it's houses, and so we have to go to a very inspiring place. People have to walk in and think, this is not everyday business, this is not like going to work. You want to be able to curate an environment that people feel very excited to be in, and it doesn't tire you after all these days. There's a lot of things that come into the sprint. It's not just work, 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 it's also free time, blah, blah, blah. So we make sure that that also exists. Food, all of that. The fourth part is, how do we actually make it happen? How do we structure these 5 days? So I told you we have 3 different types of sprint. And what we do with the client is try to understand how we break all of these 5 days. How do we make sure that we understand exactly what's going to happen minute by minute? That is something that also doesn't get done. I've participated in a lot of sprints and design thinking processes that it's essentially get in this room and let's go, right? And that, to us, that's a huge fail. So we are very precise in terms of who works with who, how do we break out the teams, what needs to be accomplished every step of the way, how do we pull all these pieces together, how do we test these pieces to make sure that we are on the right track, what happens if it's in the right track, but we have contingency plans. So there's a lot of interesting things you have to really put your mind to it and prepare, plan A, plan B, before you engage. Okay, so that's preparation. Then we get to sprinting. Let's sit all of these people together in a place and let's work. So what's in there? Let me show you guys one example for a communication sprint. So something that usually yields a campaign at the end of it. So I'm going to show you guys from day 1 to 5 how we do it. And this has been taken a lot from inspirations that we saw around the world, from what Hyper Island is doing in Sweden, Chaos Pilot is doing in Denmark. There's teams around the world doing something similar to that. IDEO does something similar to this. Google Sprints is structured around something that looks a bit like this, but it's never been applied to communication the way that we do. So what we do is this. On day 1, we don't solve anything. Day 1 is only for us to understand the context of our problem. So we try to get in there and make people share all the information they have, so that the goal of day 1 is to say, if you came in as a designer and there's some things you understand about how you design for kids, for instance, please make a 10-15 minute presentation so that after this, all of us know at least the basic elements of designing for kids, so that we all can make decisions together. It's not just for you to know. Same thing with someone who understands where the budget comes from, or who sells the clothing, or who markets the clothing. So everyone presents a little bit of information, and the goal, if we did this right, is that at the end of day 1, we all kind of know the basic, most important things that everyone else in the room knows. So we're preparing so that day 2, we don't work separately, we work together, and we all can make decisions together because we all know it. This is very tough. I take everyone's phones away in the beginning of the day. So that's actually the worst part of the sprinting with us, which is to not have your phone with you. And it comes as a shock, but it interrupts a lot. So we need people to be 100% focused, otherwise it doesn't work. So that's one of the little things that we do. We structure, we make sure people are committed, we do little exercises, done. Then it is about sharing all of this content. Like I told you guys, everybody presents a little bit. We interview consumers, they come in. We look at what's happening around the world. So where is this brand intersecting with culture? What's happening with its competition? So we try to understand. Think of this as a brief that usually gets thrown at your desk in 5 seconds. This is like a day's brief. And you will walk out of there knowing more about that than you have ever known. We sometimes do field trips. We go when we understand what's happening and how we brew. You would imagine what that is. It has to be very fun because it's a tiring day. It's all about absorbing content and you don't actually do anything with it. So it gets a bit tiring. And there's a few exercises through day 1 as well so that people can get that content to solidify in their minds. After you go through a lot of information like this day today at the conference, you forget a lot of it. So we have to do little exercises that people have to think about what's most important, reserve, reconnect. We do a little bit of that so we don't lose a lot of interesting insights through the day. And then very quickly in this process, we get to the big idea immediately. We don't wait and waste time to get to something that's powerful because we know that in 5 days it has to be done. So we try to attack it very aggressively, very quickly. So on day 2, we start in the communication sprint doing brainstorm exercises. This is difficult to do. You have to put all of this team together, clients, experts and stuff. into the same room and get them to think for themselves and have them go into very different spaces and come up with lateral thinking, blah, blah, blah. So there are a lot of exercises for that. Sometimes a lot of these exercises are made in groups, small groups, large groups, individual. Sometimes it's about writing, sometimes it's about acting. But what we try to do during this day, day 2, is to come up with a lot of ideas. So in a brainstorm exercise, what's most important for us, instead of trying to get to the idea immediately, we try to first see what's possible. We fill out like walls and walls of ideas. We call them proto-ideas. So in the beginning, like imagine these groups, we just roll through a lot of different exercises. There's like 8 minutes, 10 minutes. We want to capture something that could be powerful and then later recombine, do other exercises. So it's less about trying to find the idea. So you know the drill. There's no no's, nothing negative. We just want to be able to like pull things from people and exhaust them and have them have the sense that they've tried everything that was possible. So we tried to stop at around 40 to 50 ideas. Now we need to bring them down, do a short list. What are the 5 most important ideas here? There's a process to do that. It's through voting initially, then we discuss, we create a criteria evaluation, we run the main ideas through it, we see what survives. What's really, really important is that we do consumer testing on day 2. So after the group thinks, okay, we have these 3 quite powerful ideas, instead of us deciding what wins, we bring consumers at that point in time and we show it to them. Very informally, we sit them down and say, look, what do you think if tomorrow this were to happen, or that, or that? Then we have a group discussion, and a lot of times they illuminate us massively. So it's extremely powerful in a sprint to not advance unless you have some degree of certainty, and we do that through testing in real time. Sometimes our testing is done locally because it's a local campaign. We just need people that live in the area. Sometimes we do it remotely because we're talking to a global audience. It's done in different languages, but we make it happen. We never skip it. So we do it through Skype. We find a way to listen to consumers. And then finally, we have to make a decision after that, and we leave day 2 with the idea. We say, this is the idea. This is what we're going to pursue from this point on. Okay. That's day 2. Day 3, we start with expanding that idea. Up to that point, the idea, like I told you, it's still a proto-idea. In the case of Wizz Air, we knew we were going to put people in this airplane, and we wouldn't tell them where they were going to go. It was about finding the spirit of getting into new adventures. This was what made life worth living, right? So exciting for the young generation. But it's still very fragile at this stage. So we try to then, from day 3 on, break the group into different modes, and they work on slightly different parts of the idea. Then we have an overall discussion, and then we break into these specific sections. Some people are going to look into the contact ecosystem. They're going to try to see, so what are the contact points for this? What kind of media do we use? How do we get people interested? And that's more of a strategic call. Then we have a lot of visual development happening on the other side. So in the case of a campaign, it's about trying to develop key visuals and things of the sort. Then we're talking about message as well, taglines, whatever is around this, but how do we communicate that through a sentence, through telling the story? How do we write the press release for that? And then there's also a lot of pre-production exploration. What we try to make sure, to be very sure about, is that we don't end up with something that cannot be done, which is kind of my specialty when I worked at agencies. It was always something incredible that usually took more time to build or more money, or that we wanted to work with a technology that we didn't really understand, but we hoped that we could tame it in time, or that we would have access to this talent, that influencer, but we knew nothing. So what part of the group does on day 3 is to go and solve that. To say, how much does this cost? Now. Call people now. If you think you're going to work with, whatever, Kesha, call her manager today. Find out if she's possibly available at all. Otherwise, the idea that was all surrounding her dies, right? So we need to make those decisions quickly, and we need to make sure where we're getting into technology and all of that. So a part of the team is prepared to just run after these details. So what we do is a moment during the day, which is towards the end of the day, where we say, okay, so you will empower your people to make those decisions, but you won't be totally detached from the process. So in this board call, we sometimes have CEOs, we have investors, we have people that have a lot at stake in this process, but they're not going to stop to work with us. We're going to show you as a group how much we have progressed at the end of the day, and it's not your role to tell us, I accept this or not, I sign it off or not. It's already signed off. The group that you empowered made those decisions. But you're going to listen to how much we've progressed, and you're going to tell us what to keep in mind for the next day, because we're going to decide other things in the next day, and you can participate. Let us know. You know so much. We want to capture that. Day 4 is when we start a production overhaul. We start to just build shit. And the reason why we build so aggressively is because we understand, you understand, that there is a huge gap from your idea theoretically on paper, on beautiful keynote, and how it actually plays out once you start building it. Start fiddling with the technology. Create a bit of a demo of that. Is it even possible? Let's put it into practice. Let's see how much we can do. And then you have, I'm just showing a few pictures of what we've done in the past. We film, we photograph, there and then we illustrate, we compose music. So all of that is done by the people who've come and who've participated with us. This is an amazing picture. This is an audio, a music composer who has never been part of the whole process. And he was so brilliant, just helping us find the idea and everything. He only looks at this process at the very end of it, but he participated in the whole thing. And the way he composed was completely different, not off a brief, but being part of the solution. So we play with the technology, everybody's working in separate fields. On day 4 is when everybody just like stops and just works, goes out and just produces work. And we try to just make sure that everything we're producing makes sense. From like, you know, the distilling, we actually printed bottles. I mean, you have to really make it happen and see it to see if that's what you really mean. And then what we do is we test with consumers again on day 4. So on day 2, we tested kind of the idea, and it's a very open conversation. On day 4, we test assets. We say, so okay, you're walking down the street and you see this. What do you think of that? Is this something that is clearly articulated? It's something you would tell your friend? It's something you want to be involved with? So we capture different types of data from that conversation when things are a little more real. And then we have time to actually adapt all the things we're creating based on that input. Very powerful too. On day 5, it's still a lot of production, like wrapping up. Sometimes the things that we do need to be redone. Sometimes you have like beautiful people walking outside with great cameras, and then something fails, we have to redo, and we just do with a phone. It doesn't matter, we just have to see it to believe it. So we create all of these demos. We finish it quickly, and then we present, and then we celebrate. Remember, this is the only time in my career where instead of presenting, very afraid that it could be a yes or a no, there's no no's, because the client was working with us through the whole thing. I know this is what's going to see the light of day. Out of our 25 sprints, 20 of them we saw on the streets exactly what we created, then and there, which is very cool. All right, so that's how we do it. I wanted to also quickly take you guys through some of the things that I've learned that actually kill a creative sprint. So we've done a lot of things wrong during these 2.5 years that we've been working through this, and we're getting our methodology better and better and better. And these will kill these long 5-day creative sprints, but these will kill anything that you guys will do in just getting everybody together in this room and say, let's try to work through this. So I just wanted to share some of these thoughts with you today. One of them is insufficient preparation. This idea that, oh no, we don't know exactly a lot of the things that surround us, a lot of the context of this problem, or what even they want to achieve, but let's just do it. Let's just create some great ideas, and then we'll see later on. Let's impress the client. That to us doesn't work. It's a recipe for disaster. So we try to make sure that even though sometimes our clients get very tired of us to talk through the same brief for the 5th or 6th time and spend time doing that and their time, but it's extremely important to not fail. The second thing, well, I talked about the unclear brief. Insufficient preparation, I guess it's about not structuring all the days correctly. Fine. The wrong people, that's key. Whenever I hire people to participate, and I've hired close to 200 of them over a year and a half, there are great people that do not work well in these environments, that you have to actually get your hands dirty and build things. A lot of people can talk the talk, and they're very smart in doing that. You have to get to listen to, because they open up your imagination and they point you in the right direction. When it comes down to saying, okay, this amazing thing you're saying, now sit down and show me, then they don't know. Fine, that exists. They're very important, especially in a large corporation. They'll get the client to be very excited, give you all the money in the world, but they don't know how to do it. I don't work with people like that. I like to work with people that know how to actually make things happen. Hiring big talkers, I think I'm kind of repeating myself. Okay, not a doer. The decision makers can't participate. That's one of the limitations of a process like this. We require the decision makers to be in the room with us. And I understand it's not easy to do. That's one of our key limitations. A lot of people want to work with us, but they say, I can't stop for 5 days. And I tell them, if you cannot stop for 5 days to decide what your brand is all about, or how you're going to run for the next year, it's kind of lame, right? I mean, put some effort into it. All right. Let's let a bit of chaos in for creativity. Like a lot of people, I remember having these amazing conversations with creative directors, like, no, here at X agency, it's all about chaos. This is beautiful. Like people from different nationalities, and like they just sit in a room and they just pump out. I'm like, really? It seems very haphazard to me that you don't have a process, that you don't actually structure the way by which people arrive at ideas, just in order to see that you've covered enough ground. You're just relying on like this eureka moment from some genius. That doesn't work. Anybody can have amazing ideas, and it's up to you as a creative lead to make sure that that comes out of the team. So we structure that a lot. There is not a lot of chaos in our processes. 7, run a total democracy. We're all here together. There's 12, 15 of us. We all have a vote, and that will make things work, right? No, that actually doesn't make things work. So one of the things is, we don't search for consensus when we do sprints. What we try to do is to have discussions until the very vast majority of people are on board, and then we push the rest of the people in. We never wait for consensus. Consensus kills great ideas. There's a bit of a trick to later on, like these 3 or 4 people that fell off the boat, and they're like, I wanted idea 2, not 3. And they get like, pissed, I don't want to work anymore. There's a way to actually bring them back. The way that I do this is I get them to work on the things that they believe the idea is strong about, and then they work slightly separately, and they start getting excited about what they're doing because they have power over that. They bring them back into the team. But it's not a democracy. 8, don't test with your audience. You know it, right? You have all the data, you know that's a problem culturally, you found the specific amazing field to play with, you created your PowerPoint, you brought it to the client clapped, let's go. I've done a lot of that in my agency times, and I know that you can miserably fail. I know that even if the client will insist that you test the TVC or whatever the hell it is, the idea as a whole must be tested. And you have to find a way to be a little more certain that what you're putting out into the world makes some sense. The way that we do is to test with real consumers, but my suggestion is find a way to get out of your comfort zone. You get into a bubble that you get excited about the idea. You want to sell it. You believe in it so much. Don't be that sure about your ideas without testing them. 9, don't have a precise deliverables list. That's also something that kills sprints. So when we get in, let's say for branding, we know exactly that what we need to achieve. We need to achieve everything that's all the structure behind the brand promise, why, how, what, manifesto. Then we look at all the visual structures. We're going to put that into practice through a 1 page of a website. We're going to do calling cards, this and that. So we know how much we need to produce in 5 days. That informs me of how I structure the 5 days, which informs me of what kind of people I need to bring into these 5 days. If I don't have that, it's very haphazard as well, and everybody's going to be unhappy, always. If you deliver up to here without actually having communicated that, somebody's always going to say, oh, but I was hoping that you could at least do the little app thing, right? So be clear about what you need to deliver. Agree upon that before you start these sprints. Let's not just go as far as we can. 10, finally, save money on setup. This is in the beginning of our journey. We didn't have enough money at all, and the clients didn't want to pay for this. So they just said, oh, we have this little room here in the back, and we're going to sit there. Big mistake. They sit there for 5 seconds, then they have something else. You know, like, you have to find a way to create a mental space that's a safe space for everyone to be extremely creative and make these decisions. It has to symbolize, this is not business as usual. This is something completely different we're going to do together. And it's very powerful, and it requires mental focus. That's why we brought you to this amazing place. Like, you guys are here. This is not every day. This is a special thing. And we try to mimic that. All right, so that comes to the end of it. If you're interested in seeing something, it's here. Thank you.